It's good to be back with you today. We're excited about another opportunity to get to work on your marriage relationship.
We look forward to entering into this session with you all and talking about how do we deal with our issues.
Right. So let's get into today's material. All right, well, let's get into some preliminary discussion about how we're going to look at bringing up issues. So one of the first things that we want you to realize is that you don't want to vomit up an issue at your spouse's feet just any time during the week.
Yuck. Even to say that sounds pretty disgusting.
It does.
What does it mean to vomit up an issue at our spouse's feet?
Right.
Vomiting up an issue at our spouse's feet means that we would be just bringing up an issue at a random time, and nobody's prepared for that.
Yeah, you're catching each other off guard, and maybe one of you is about to leave for work or go out for something, or just came in the door from somewhere. You're not in a frame of mind, and you're not thinking about what the rules of
Right.
engagement are. We want you to have set aside times, maybe 2 or 3 times during the week for a certain period of time, maybe for 20 or 30 minutes, that you're going to say, this is the time that we're going to bring up issues. Let's say, for example, you've got Tuesday at 6:30 and Saturday at 5. And so the rest of the week, you're not bringing up issues. You know, if something comes up, then you're thinking of what the next day is, you're going to put it down, and you're going to bring it up at that time.
The idea is, to keep the overall feel of the relationship positive.
Right.
So if we have certain times that we bring these up, that creates an overall feeling of positivity, but we have those periods of time with boundaries around them and rules for those
Right.
periods of time where we're dealing with our issues,
Right.
and we're not letting it spill over into the rest of the week, because that's when we're using unconditional acceptance, all the things that you've been practicing
Right.
that have built up to this point.
So if something comes up, an issue comes up, it's something you want to talk to your spouse about Sunday at 3:00, then you're gonna write it down. You're gonna hold on to it,
Right.
and then when your next time you have set aside, for example, the Tuesday night, then you're
Right.
gonna bring it up then.
Right. You always could ask the spouse, I have something I need to talk to you about. When would it be a good time for us to talk if we talk before our scheduled time? What happens when we don't deal with our issues is one spouse is going to go into a panic mode.
Right. So a lot of times that's where the issues are, is when you don't know that you're going to have an opportunity to bring up something that was bothering you or that was important to you that you want to make them aware of.
It's usually the wife that will do this, because the man, and these roles can reverse, but the man tends to withdraw and she tends to pursue.
Right.
Because a woman is so relational, she will know what the issues are, and she will present them to connect, to protect that deeper intimacy in the relationship. But when a man withdraws, she'll go into a panic mode, and if you're carnal, you'll be tempted to nag, or to insist that we're going to resolve this and we're going to resolve it now, regardless of whether it's a good time or not. Because if we never resolve our issues and we're always running from them, then we've got one person that feels like, if we drop this, we'll never come back to it.
Right. So if your spouse has the confidence knowing that, hey, I'm going to have an outlet, or if you have that confidence, I know I'm going to get to bring it up. And right now is not the best time. So many times we sabotage our issue, but just because it's not a good time for our spouse.
Right.
So one thing that does is it helps you get in the right frame of mind when you know that, say, Tuesday at 6:30 is our time to bring up an issue. Then when that time comes, all the rules that we're about to give you about discussing an issue, you're going to think, okay, these are the rules that I need to abide by. I think you'll begin seeing a lot of breakthrough in your relationship just when you are putting out the effort to hear the issue that your spouse has, and that you're able to give your input also.
Right. And so we want to make sure that we are interacting on a positive manner with each other. So that's critical, the positivity. And the unconditional acceptance really comes into play here.
Right.
We want to work toward we. It's not going to be he or she, or, well, you win this argument. That's not the goal.
No, the relationship is what you're working on.
Yeah.
Not my
The
side
we.
or her side or
Yeah.
individuality. And maybe that's some of the problem that could be being faced, is just having more of a singular mentality of living as a single person.
Oh, yeah.
When now you're a married couple and need to think as a we. We have so many choices of ways that we can bring up something. There can be negative ways, neutral ways, or positive ways.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we are understanding what is a positive way of presenting information to my spouse.
If I step on my spouse's emotional toes, I am responding in a way that comes across to him as negative. He's the only one that can tell me what would sound positive or at least neutral to him.
Right. So that's the information about your spouse and the way your spouse interprets what they're hearing that we need to make a change in.
And we can't say, well, that's just who I am, and you
Right.
just need to be okay with that.
Right.
Well, no, not if we're blending into unity with another person.
Right.
Remember, the husband-wife relationship is different from any other. We can't classify it like we do our interactions with our siblings, our parents, our coworker, our best friend.
Right. So another thing is we want to make sure that you're focusing on simple issues at first, not getting into something that's very complicated and has a lot of different facets to it. You want to just stick to something simple.
Think baby steps as we go into this part. If you do it too quickly, you may not use the tool well. So in the beginning, using the tool well is more important than the issue.
Right. So the process is more important than the issue itself. So if you get down, this is the right way to bring up an issue, then you can apply that to any issue, big or small.
Yeah, so we're going to start with things that are so simple, and we're only going to progress as we feel healthy and stable on that level. Don't go too quickly. Think about it as you want to use the appropriate tool. So you wouldn't use hedge trimmers for heart surgery, would you? You would use the appropriate tools that a heart surgeon would use.
Very delicate.
And there's a difference in using a delicate tool for the heart, which is what we're talking about in the intimacy level of a marriage. So if you pull out the hedge trimmers, guess what? You're going to cause pain and discomfort, screaming and yelling and ouching.
Right. Yeah, so let's be mindful of what's going on in our spouse's interpretation of what we're saying.
Right. And remember, the goal is to please your spouse, not to please me. It's not all about what can Sean do to make me happy. It's more about what can I do to please him. Remember 1 Corinthians 7. We're talking about biblical relationship here.
Right.
Not the way the world looks at it. It's all about me. It revolves around me. What do I want? What about my needs? No, it's all about serving our spouse.
Right. And so all the biblical teaching on marriage that we've talked to you previously about, this is coming into the application of it here.
And so we want to be able to communicate behaviors that are causing a problem here in the relationship.
Right.
Because problems cause distance. And as we increase in distance in the relationship, bigger things can then come between us. And guess what? That makes us back up, because anytime there's pain, we'll back up. And then something bigger is able to get in there. But guess what? It will cause pain and discomfort and cause us to back up, which creates greater distance.
Right. So, a lot of times we use the phrase stepping on each other's emotional toes, and so you're going to back up if somebody steps on your toes.
Right.
Even if it was an accident, it's appropriate to apologize. And so we want to understand what the sensitivities are.
Wow, I'm ready to go into the tool. Are you?
Yep, let's do it. All right, let's get started. We want to give you some rules for making a simple request or bringing up an issue.
This is fun. And I think you're going to find that it's fun too, because it helps you be able to talk again.
Yeah.
So we want to do it well, right? So put out a lot of effort. Your biggest effort is going to be in the direction of self-control.
Right. So we also call this, speaker-listener rules. And so the first thing that we're going to cover is from the standpoint of the speaker, which is the person that's bringing up the issue.
But we have to know who is the speaker and who is the listener.
True.
And what we find in marital problems is everybody's trying to talk and nobody's listening.
Role confusion.
Yes. So the thing is, though, if we're going to have a good conversation, we know we have to have a speaker. But do we stop and think, I also have to be an aggressive, active listener?
Right. And when is it time for the speaker to become the listener and the listener to become the speaker? You're going to switch roles at some point.
So what we're going to talk to you about is how to recognize what your role is, and then how to operate in that role.
Right. So once you've decided who's going to go first, who's going to bring up the first issue, then we want to make sure that you're keeping that as a positive request. For example, we use the putting your socks in the hamper as a good example of that. Hey, when you come in for the evening, would you please put your socks in the hamper?
Can you see that is very straightforward? It's a positive request. It's very simple. So the thing is, what we would like for you to stick with first are things that have to do with the way you interact over an issue. It might be tone of voice, facial expressions, choice of words, body language, things that we need our spouse to know, this is a problem for me, things that will close or escalate you.
Okay, why don't you give an example of that? That'd be a little bit different than the socks in the hamper.
True. For me, because of whatever in my childhood, not even sure why, but if Sean talks to me in a firm voice, now we can look at that and say, oh, that's not a sinful thing, it's not a bad thing, but for Rhonda, it's very negative. I associate that.
It can shut her down.
Right. I associate that with things from my past, the way my dad taught to me, which probably wasn't bad, but for that particular situation, it pulls in, when Sean does that, it pulls forward a lot of negativity associated with that voice. And all of a sudden, I'm flooded with negative feelings and thoughts and thought patterns that then I will be tempted to project onto Sean. Can you see why it's important for Sean to be aware that that's a problem for me and why it's a problem for me?
Right. So that's a good example of something, the type thing that you want to be bringing up is as you are the speaker bringing up an issue. Things that are impacting the relationship.
So if I were the speaker and I initiated with an issue, I could say something like, Sean, when we are talking and you get tempted to get upset, would you please be careful not to use a firm tone with me? The presentation would hopefully not come across in a negative way to Sean.
There's no manipulation. It's just a simple request.
And so and we'll get into all of this, but it needs to be it needs to not have any manipulation, insinuations, or barbs.
Or when you do that, you always, or you never.
You're so mean.
Right.
The way you talk to me sometimes, can you see where that can go?
So we don't want to attack our spouse when we're making a request. We don't want to gush on them.
The thing is, it may feel mean to me, but that doesn't mean he was mean.
Right.
And it doesn't mean he even felt or intended to be mean.
Right.
It only meant that there was a perception I had associated with something. Mm-hmm. And I just need to make him aware, but I don't need to tag him with my feelings.
Right.
My feelings are not always accurate.
Right.
I can't take those and identify somebody because of them.
Right. And we'll get into the part of sharing how something impacted you later, but at this point, you're just going to make a simple request without all the insinuations, manipulation, and barbs.
Right, because like Sean said, there is a place for talking about the way that made me feel on a surface level.
The impact.
But some people want to emotionally dump on the other person and drag them through the mud. Let me let you know how you made me feel.
Right.
And that can be vicious.
Yeah.
And that's not appropriate. We don't have to do that.
Stay out of that. So one thing we want to remember is that you're keeping the speaker's keeping the presentation to 1 to 3 sentences. You're not going to go into a lengthy monologue and let me tell you for 10 minutes everything about it. So you just want to make it very simple. I think you can get the listener lost in the forest of all the things that you're sharing.
So don't make this a grand soliloquy where you go off and look into the moonlight and start speaking. Because what happens is you will deposit 5, 10, 20 issues. And you can only deal with one issue at a time.
Right. So you want to keep the attention span on the issue and being able to clearly understand what's being brought up. And so you want to make sure that you're staying out of any body language or any nonverbal communication, something that you're communicating negatively to your spouse.
So think that the kinds of things you want to present at this level, and it would be great to make a list individually. You don't have to discuss them and say, look at my list against you. Make a list, a private list that you prayerfully consider of the things that close or escalate you. And then go and prioritize them. What's the first thing you want to address when it's your turn? Because you're going to take turns. It's going to go slowly.
So as far as the listener goes, we've got rules for the listener. And so when you hear the speaker present their message in 1 to 3 sentences, the listener wants to basically just restate exactly what they heard. Don't add anything to it. Don't add to it your interpretation of that. You just want to simply state back, just like when Rhonda presented that about the tone of voice. I pretty much just repeated back exactly what she said.
And you don't want to twist it. So what you're saying is,
you don't ever want me to bring up my issue, or you don't want me to be me, or something that you would add to it.
And can you see that's twisting the message? That wasn't said. And it certainly brings up what we would call a topic B, which I guess is the next thing we're going to talk about. Topic A, topic B. Wow, this really impacted our own relationship.
Right. And that, again, is keeping an identification of who's the speaker and who's the listener.
Only the speaker can keep you on topic. Right. So whoever's the speaker is going to present an issue, and that's topic A. You want to stay on topic A.
Right. So if the listener repeats back and says something that the speaker says, that's not what I meant, that's not what I said, then the speaker's going to have to say it again until the listener gets it. Think about it like playing catch. The speaker throws the ball. The listener, when they caught it, that means they got what the speaker was saying. I understood what you're asking, what you're saying.
And you want to be careful as the listener that when you respond, you're not bringing up topic B. Topic B is another facet of the general idea. And you might say, well, it's on topic because it's my perspective. It's how I think about what you feel. It's what I see. You're not based on what you said. I'm only responding to what you said.
Right. You're not giving your interpretation of what the speaker said,
or of the speaker's feelings or thoughts or intentions. So I might say, for example, I really would appreciate it. Would you please not use the firm tone with me? So what would be a topic B, for example?
Well, I wouldn't have used that firm tone if you had not spoken to me in a disrespectful way.
Can you see that's topic B?
Right. So that's really bringing up something that would be more of an issue of disrespect. So
yeah, and the thing is, it's related, right? Because we know that if I speak in a sassy or disrespectful way, guess what? It's going to stir him to want to respond to me in a negative way.
It doesn't mean that your issue, the listener's issue, is not important just because it's not being brought up at this time. It just means there is a specific time and place for that to happen.
Right.
So that's why we want you to stick, rigidly to these rules about when you bring up your issue.
Right. So the thing is, it would be appropriate to make sure, well, that's not what I was saying, that's a topic B, or whatever works for you, but take it back to the topic. This is what I was saying. The thing is, what I need Sean to hear me saying is, regardless of what might have triggered it, the firm tone is still not okay with me. Now, it is valid, and he certainly needs to share with me if I came across in a disrespectful way, but that's another topic for when it's his turn to be the speaker.
All right.
So we have to take turns. When it's my turn to be the speaker, I call the topic, and the listener needs to be very careful to stay on topic and hear if the speaker says, well, that's off topic. That's not what I'm talking about. It's related, but it's not what I'm trying to say. Then we have to regroup and say, well, what are you trying to say then? And we have to be able to set aside our own agenda to hear what the speaker's saying.
And this is often where, when you bring up an issue, this is where things get derailed, and you begin to feel like that I can't ever bring things up because
we dealt with that.
My spouse always turns it around to what their problem is, and then we can never deal with my issue because they're always bringing up their issue.
Yeah.
So everybody's trying to be heard, and nobody's listening.
If I can only see myself, I can never hear the speaker. I have to set aside me to see Sean.
So one thing, you want to the speaker wants to ask the listener, how did I present that? Was that presented well? And then you can kind of critique each other, over the presentation. What could be done to present it better? And you don't want to turn this around now when this happens into it becomes its own issue.
No.
But you do want to know at some point, did I present that well?
Right? You want to be careful that you're bouncing. So if the speaker, notice, is the one that's inviting that comment. The listener isn't offering it. The speaker is requesting it. Did you feel that I presented well?
True.
If the speaker doesn't invite it, we ask that if the listener just can't move forward because of the way the speaker presented, it's okay to say, that came across as negative. Please be careful not to go into detail. Negative is very general and surface.
Could you try rephrasing that, saying
Right.
that a little differently?
Right. Maybe watch your tone, please, when you restate that. Could you watch your facial expressions, please, when you restate that? That was a little difficult for me.
A lot of times there's a lot of baggage that goes along with the request we're making that can be shutting down and sabotaging our effort to bring our issue up.
Which is why we don't want to be in a challenging request right now. Because, if my spouse is requesting something that I have a hurdle to get over before I can do it, well, then we have a more difficult issue, and then we should wait for that. That should come later. If we're too intense, and we probably get into this in a minute, but as women especially, we need to reduce that level of intensity because men don't, it's a hindrance for a man. Too many words, too much emotions. Because men don't do intensity or too much emotions well. If we put that in there, and for a percentage of you, those roles are reversed, especially if the male is more verbal and communicates more easily. Don't put something in the picture that's going to sabotage your message. You probably really want to be heard. Why jeopardize it from your first sentence? So women, you want to be very careful to decrease that intensity because for a man, it says there's going to be a fight, and we want to be really careful that we're not communicating that. We're not talking to a woman. We're talking to a man.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, it's okay to ask, hey, could you turn down the intensity level? I think I could hear what you're saying better if it didn't have all the intensity in it.
We've done that.
Yeah.
And
it's worked well.
Or can you watch your emotions right now? You sound, you're coming across as defensive. We don't want to blame or accuse.
Yeah. The intensity of emotions sometimes can cloud it so much we can't really hear what's being said for all the emotion.
For the way it's said.
That's
Sean
true.
used to say that to me over the years, and I couldn't get it. And I said,
I can't hear what you're saying for the way you're saying it.
And I basically responded, well, you're going to have to teach me then because I'm just not getting it. The thing is, once the listener has grasped the message, You can, you want to make sure the speaker agrees that you got it. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you want to ask also, is there anything else the listener wants to be the one to initiate asking the speaker?
Right.
Is there anything else that you have to say about that, or any other thoughts or feelings that you have about that?
The thing is, if the listener does not invite speaker, let that be it. Because the listener can gauge how much he or she can take. Because the idea is to present it in little tidbits of information.
Yeah, remember, you're not going into a long soliloquy.
You want to bounce on that tidbit. So if I present a tidbit to Sean and we bounce well on that, he can ask me, is there any more information on this?
And you're just giving it a little bit at a time.
Another tidbit.
Something, it's just like feeding a baby. You don't, gag them by giving in an enormous amount of food. It's probably going to feel pretty challenging for some of you to keep that issue down to 1 to 3 sentences.
Right, but we want to bounce. And that's why it can only be on tidbits, right? You can't bounce on large amounts of information.
And you want to, lay aside anything that would be escalating the other one.
Right.
So, when you find out what the issue is and you've done something, that offended your spouse, the listener should apologize. That would be appropriate to say, hey, I'm sorry for doing that.
And the thing is, one thing that we encounter with couples is, why should I apologize if I didn't do anything wrong? And if I stepped on your toe in the foyer at church, guess what? I would apologize. But did I sin against you? Did I wrong you willfully? No. But if I unintentionally caused some sort of discomfort for you, I would apologize for doing it. And so, we want to apologize. Somehow we can connect with them on what happened. And we need to find a way to validate. We don't have to agree, but we need to find a way to validate and connect with our spouse on what they presented. If I'm told that my tone sounded negative to my spouse, I have to be able to say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to come across in a way that would feel like that to you. How could I present that differently next time that wouldn't feel negative?
Yeah, that can be a humbling thing, to be able to say you're sorry to your spouse.
We have to be able to change our behavior when our spouse presents an issue to us.
Right. So that's important to come up with a plan. How are you going to change for in the future?
Because if I stepped on your toe in the church foyer and you said, ow, and I said, oh, I'm so sorry, but I keep doing it, I'm negligent. And I'm just not paying attention because it's just not as important to me. But guess what happens to you then? You'd start avoiding me in the foyer because I'm probably going to step on your toe because I'm just not paying attention.
A lot of this is just finding out what those things that we're doing that are offending our spouse are, right, and changing that.
So once the listener understands and agrees to change, okay, I will be careful to watch my tone so I don't come across in a disrespectful way or a way that's sassy. What is the plan? So the listener wants to let the speaker know what you just shared is very important to me, and I have the attitude of appreciating that they shared their heart, and now you know something more about your spouse. You can go into a deeper unity because you know this. But what will you do to change? How will that look different next time?
That's good.
So going forward, it's going to happen again.
Right. And you don't want to make sure that you know how to formulate a new habit, make a new plan, a new habit for how you're going to accomplish these things.
Because when we're changing old habits, we're going to fall on our face. If we see a baby learning how to walk, we wouldn't say, yeah, he's been walking really well today, didn't fall down once, he's walking now. But tomorrow he fell on his face. Well, I guess he'll never walk. Well, we know that would be ludicrous to say that. That's part of learning to walk.
Yeah, and you want to find out, what are some new ways that how could I say that differently? What could I do better to let, this be known?
So, how could the listener respond better next time? It may be clear. If it isn't clear, it's appropriate to say, what could I say that would come across positively or at least neutral to you? So if I need to say something, I may have a lot of feeling associated with it, and it may not be that I couldn't say it. It may be that I just used too much negative feeling when I said it. If I come across as very disappointed, and Sean takes it as I feel disappointed in him, or if I feel aggravated and I show my aggravation, that's going to have an offensive feel to it.
Right.
So I've got to tone all that, dial it down, zero it out if you can. Think business meeting.
Yeah. And present well.
Right. So then we need to know, okay, if you accidentally talk to me with a firm tone next time, how can I let you know in a way that wouldn't be negative to you? So that would be part of the plan.
Yeah. And so you want to make sure that anything that is offensive to your spouse, that's something you're paying attention to.
The listener needs to confirm, did you feel like the issue you shared was resolved?
Right.
If the speaker says, yes, I do, and you can feel that way if you feel that there's a good plan in motion. If the speaker says, no, I don't, you want to say as a listener, well, what would make you feel that this was resolved? So that you've got a solid plan in place.
That's right. So that's kind of the goal that we want to arrive at, is that the speaker, and this can really take place very quickly. We've gone into a lot of detail to explain to you a lot of minute details about everything, but this can take place very quickly. And when the speaker is presenting something in 1 to 3 sentences, the listener is repeating it back, asking for more information, apologizing, then the speaker is going to let them know, yes, that's what I was saying, and I feel like the issue is resolved. That pretty much, wraps it up.
And remember the plan. So you got the presentation, the hearing of it, the apology, the plan. The plan involves the listener verbalizing, I will do it differently this time. This is how I will do it differently next time. And the speaker finding out, well, you're probably, but not you're going to do it again. That sounds doubtful, but we know it will happen again. So what's the plan for if it happens again? What will you say to trigger that listener to know this is happening again? Remember the changes that we had in mind. And the listener can let the speaker be aware of a good way to alert them to the fact that this is happening. And lastly, that it was actually resolved.
Yeah. And so once you've gone through all these steps, you want to swap places then, and the other spouse is going to be the speaker.
And this is a beautiful process for you to learn. So many couples never learn how to deal with their issues. So knowing how to do this in a way that's positive is going to make an impact on your relationship.
Doing this session well and the preceding homework and things that you've been doing is usually a pretty big turning point with couples that we meet with. And we look forward to hearing from you next time.